What is up, YouTube family? This is your friendly neighborhood Josh Rosh here. I know it's been a while since I've made a video. Sorry about that. I've had some life stuff come up, good stuff. Got a new job, but unfortunately that has kind of taken a little bit of my time away as far as being able to make videos as much as I wanted to, or as often as I wanted to. But on today's video, this is going to be my first really big content video of the year. If you have seen the Worship Leader Hangout video that I was a part of, I'll link that in the description down below if you haven't watched it. But this is going to be kind of a supplemental video to that one. But it's basically going to be about the same thing. So what we're going to be looking at today are 4 of the most common worship grooves or worship beats that you need to know as a worship drummer. Now that does not mean that this only works in a worship setting. You can use these drum beats or these grooves in any kind of musical genre, but they work really well for worship, so that's what we're going to be focusing on today. If you haven't done so already, please like the video, subscribe if you haven't, hit that notification bell, so whenever I finally get around to making another video, you can at least be notified of it and you can come and check it out. But without further ado, let's get into the top 4 drum grooves for worship drummers. Alright, so the first one that we're going to be checking out today, I'm actually going to use 2 examples. So throughout all these 4 sections, I'm going to give you examples of songs that I'm pulling these from. I obviously can't play the songs audio-wise just for copyright reasons, but I'll tell you what they are, and I'm going to play examples of where I'm getting this from in those songs. I'm going to do 2 songs on this first section, and I'll tell you why in a second. But this first one is going to be called 4 on the floor, or just your basic kick drum pattern. The first example I'm going to use is the song called Shout It Out by Vertical Church. It basically carries that 4 on the floor pattern through almost the entire song. And it's a great way to work on your dynamics as well, because it starts off pretty basic with just the 4 on the floor and the hi-hat pattern, and then it expands upon itself and gets more and more in-depth and more complex as the song goes on. But I'm just going to show you an example of the beginning of the song, just to kind of show you where it starts, and then I'll show you an example towards the end of the song when it kind of goes full out. But this first one is going to be the intro. It technically starts with a hi-hat, but I'll just click it off and I'll give you, a couple bars of how that starts. Alright, so as you can see, that starts pretty basic. Hi-hat, 4 on the floor. That kind of carries itself through the intro and throughout the first verse and even the first chorus. It kind of comes in on the interlude between the first chorus and the second verse. But I'm going to skip past that part. I'm going to show you, this is going to be like the last chorus, kind of going into, they end with the bridge. But this is just kind of an example of it's still using that 4 on the floor kick pattern, but going full force with the full dynamic range. So I'll click that off and give you an example of that. Okay, so that's Shout It Out. The second example, the second song I'm going to use is Won't Stop Now by Elevation. And the reason I'm going to do that is it still uses just a kick pattern in the beginning, but it's slightly different from the 4 on the floor. It kind of does the same thing though structurally that Shout It Out does, where it sticks with that kick pattern kind of throughout the first verse and chorus, really kind of all the way up until it goes to the bridge as well. But I'm not going to really get into too much detail on that one. I'm just going to show you the intro because that's the main thing that I'm worried about here. Yeah, so that is pretty much it for Won't Stop Now as well. And that will end section number 1. Number 2, coming right on up. All right, groove number 2. I'm just going to call this the basic snare on 2 and 4 groove, because that's really kind of all it is. The example I'm going to be using on this is Goodness of God by Bethel. That kind of similarly to Shout It Out, it basically carries the pattern that we're talking about, the groove that we're talking about throughout the entire song. So it starts off really basic, and then it just kind of builds and builds and builds from there. So I'll give you an example of the very beginning of the song at its most basic form, and then kind of a fuller, more top of the dynamic scale example as well. But the first one is going to be right when the drums come in on the song, which is not until the first chorus. And it's really going to just be basic. The snare is going to be on the 2 and 4, and they're not hitting the kick drum, but once every other measure. So I'll give you an example. Yeah, so that's the most basic version of that. And then the next example I'm going to give in this song is going to be when it first goes to the bridge, it starts to build up, and then it gets even bigger when it goes to the second part of the bridge. This is going to be right before the down chorus. So I'll give you an example of that. All right, so there you have it. That is example number 2, the snare on 2 and 4. Stay tuned for number 3, coming right up next. All right, so for number 3, I mentioned obviously that these are 4 of the most common drum grooves. These last 2 are probably the most common. You're going to find an example of number 3 and example of number 4, and I'd say 90% of the worship songs out there, especially upbeat ones. But yeah, number 3 is just going to be your standard build-up. Now, one of the cool things with the build-up is that you can really build on any piece of the drums. And that's the cool thing about that. So the dynamics can be, anywhere from the most quiet you can go to full out, as loud as you can go, and anywhere and everywhere in between. And there's always going to be some difference that you can make to differentiate, one part of a breakdown to another. I'll just show you a lot of the examples that I'm talking about. One thing that I like to do, especially, to kind of start a build-up, is using the hi-hat and the floor tom. So that sounds like this. But probably the most basic will just be just your floor tom and your kick drum. You can use both toms as well. Then you've got probably your most classic one, which is going to be your snare and your floor tom. You can do all cymbals if you want to. And then another super common one right now is the snare and your crash or your ride. You can also do, a fill, the last, 2 measures or something coming out of a build up to really put more emphasis, on the downbeat that's coming up on that next measure. So again, tons of different possibilities with the build up. The example that I'm going to be giving though today is going to be Who You Say I Am by Hillsong. I'm not going to go through all of, because there's like 4 or 5 different build-ups in that, but listen to that song, especially the bridge, I Am Chosen, Not Forsaken, where it starts that build-up, because it goes through about 3 different types of build-ups before it goes back into that chorus. So I'm just going to play, just a couple of those. I'm going to chop them down so I'm not playing that entire bridge or that entire build-up the whole time, but I'll just kind of go through a few of these different build-ups into that last verse, or excuse me, that chorus. All right, so that was groove number 3, the build-up. Number 4 coming up is going to be a good one. All right, we've come to the end. Groove number 4. Like I said with the build-up, groove number 3, number 4 is also, especially right now, probably one of the most common grooves that you're going to hear in worship music, especially Bethel. And that's why I'm calling this groove the Bethel groove. The basis of it is basically that you're playing the snare on the 3 of the measure. And again, that can be as simple as you want it to be or as complex as you want it to be. I'll just show you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. Here's But yeah, if you don't know what I'm talking about now, or by now, you definitely will by the time I start playing something. The song that I'm going to base this off of is God of Revival by Bethel. But I could pick pretty much any Bethel song since 2015, and it's probably going to have this somewhere in the song. But God of Revival, that's just one that's kind of like on my mind. Where I'm going to pick this up and give you the example is starting with I guess it's the second verse, but it picks up about halfway through when he says, "What should my heart fear?" And then it also does a variation of that same groove on the pre-chorus right after that. So I'll just play through both of those parts real quick. So I wanted to get the example out of the way first on that one, because I want to go through some of the different variations of this as well. And again, kind of like the build up, you can just kind of do anything that you want to kind of make this sound different. I already did just the kick and the snare. Here's another one with just the floor tom and then the snare. And then, like I even showed you in the song, it builds on itself just from the second verse to the pre-chorus. But a couple things that a lot of people will like to do will accent the snare with the crash. You can, accent the crash on the, on the 4 as well to, accent that next beat, or kind of make the next phrase, I guess, pop a little bit more. That's kind of the only way I know how to say that, but I'll just show you an example of both of those ways. All right, so those were the 4 most common drum grooves for worship drummers. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you didn't enjoy the video, then that's your fault, because no one told you you had to click on this. So you only have yourself to blame. No, I'm kidding. But again, really appreciate you watching this video. All of my social media is done in the description as well, so you can be sure to follow me on all the social media accounts. But that's going to do it for this video. Be sure and join me for the next one. We will see you then.